Assalamu alaikum. I happened to watch this lecture of Sahil Adeem delivered in Australia in Canberra almost a year ago, and it was described as the Awakening Tour Canberra session on YouTube. Sahil Adeem's in Australia. And before I come to his retrogressive ideas, let me just point out the factual inaccuracies that he carried out during that lecture and other lectures as well. For instance, he claimed, addressing there, he claimed that before 1980s, the largest number of atheists were found in India. Most of the atheists in 1980 or 80s described themselves Hindus before converting to atheism. This is completely a wrong and false assertion. Even during 1980s, everybody knows that Cold War was still going on, or rather, we had the terrible tension between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War, during the decade of 1980s, because Afghan uh, crusade or Afghan jihad was going on, and both countries were heavily involved there. So the Soviet Union that encompassed 14 more countries, like including Russia, it was 15 countries. So officially, it was atheist to some extent, atheist in the sense that a large number of people or a significant number of people described themselves as non-believer, did not follow any religion. The same could be said about China, where a communist revolution took place in 1949, and officially, at least in some way, in some ways, it was atheist. In the same way, you had Eastern Bloc, or what you call communist bloc in Europe: Hungary, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, Albania, East Germany. There also a large number of people did not believe in God, or at least a significant percentage. Then you had Vietnam, North Korea, and several parts of the world where communists held strong position, or in some of the countries they were ruling, like North Korea, Vietnam, Cuba, and others. So their religion was not important at all. So by no stretch of imagination could one say that the largest number of atheists happened to be in India, or they were Indians, or they were Hindus. That is absolutely false claim. But Sahil Adeem knows that he can get away with such claims, because it's not the first time that he has made such a false claim. He has also made many false or untrue claims in the past as well. For instance, in Pakistan, he said that in a way, God helped Ashraf Ali Thanvi wrote 1400 books, with each carrying 3 to 4 or 4 to 5 volumes, with each consisting of 300 or 400 pages. That makes around 1 million pages. So that's nearly impossible uh, for any human being to write that much amount. Bertrand Russell, who was a prolific writer, he could not have written that many pages. Maulana Bulala Modudi, who was also considered very prolific, he could not have done that in the same way. Uh, Presently, Noam Chomsky, who has authored more than 74 books, he cannot claim to have written 1 million pages. So that is one of the false claims. In the same way, he also said that Afghan Taliban, he asked Afghan Taliban, when do you marry kids in Afghanistan, or young people? The Taliban replied, at the age of uh, we marry earlier, right, at the age of 16 for boys, for girls it is 12. And Sahil said, he asked them, why so early? The Taliban replied, because in Afghanistan, kids as old as 12 can understand fatwa, and they can deliver a fatwa at the age of 16. Now, how many mufti can Sahil Adeem quote, aged, only 16 or 12? Or if that is the age for boys, what would be the age for girls? Like, if they are married off at the age of 12, does it mean that they might be in a position to understand it, to understand a fatwa at the age of 8. So these are the claims that he has often made. Then he always breaks and boasts a lot that he can speak on Allama Iqbal for more than 5 days without repeating even a single sentence. And interestingly, when he spoke about Iqbal in Lahore, throughout his lecture, he hardly cited any verse of the Iqbal, only one verse, and that was also wrong. He never bothered to mention in what way Iqbal was influenced by Bergson, by Nietzsche, by Lenin, by Marx, by Hegel, by Spinoza, by Rumi, by Ghalib, by Shakespeare, by William Wordsworth, because the gentleman did not bother to read Iqbal in details. He loves to do that. Now, what's most important point is that it's not awakening tour at all. Sahil Adeem has been trying to uh, pushing Muslim towards the Stone Age by propagating his retrogressive ideas. He wants women to be covered from head to toe, which is very conservative interpretation of Islam, because there are Muslim scholars who believe that basically the order of Parda was for the wives of Prophet peace be upon him, because unlike other women who could remarry after the death of their husbands, they were not supposed to remarry. So that was particular to them. But he is like all traditional mullah, like Dr. Isra, Dr. Maulana Maududi, and other people. He believes that they should be covered from head to toe, and only their eyes should be exposed. Now, his logic is like that of Maulana Maududi or Dr. Isra, that you might get sexual arousal after looking at the face. If we apply Sahil's logic, then this desire to have sexual arousal uh, may not be confined to man, it may be in women as well. So then, why shouldn't man cover his face then? Because it could create problems for women. So that is a conservative interpretation of Islam. Then he believes that the Afghan Taliban have imposed Sharia. He heaps eulogies on Afghan Taliban. When he says that Afghan Taliban claim that boys as old as 12 years can understand a fatwa, in reality, he's romanticizing Afghan rule. Then, in the same way, he also made a very false claim that during the Doha agreement, two times Afghan Taliban said, "Give us Afia Siddiqui." You can read Doha agreement yourself. It's available on internet, on US State Department website. You can also request Taliban to give you an original copy and see and yourself whether they have really written or Sahil Adeem is telling a lie. So he resorts to blatant lies because he knows that he can get away with this. So the reason as to why I'm saying that this is not the awakening tour, it was rather an attempt to push back Muslim towards the Stone Age. Sahil Adeem is basically from a school of thought that offers conservative interpretation of Islam. If you go back to 7th century, or rather 8th century, so there were two prominent school of thoughts within Muslims. One was led by Hanbal, in a way, Hanbal, Ghazali, Abul Hasan Ashari, Ibn Taymiyyah. Another was Wasil bin Atta, Imam Azam, Abu Hanifa to some extent, and later on all the Muslim scientists, philosophers, and those having critical thinking. So one of the school of thought later on came to be known as Mu'tazilite. They lay a lot of emphasis on reason, and they would say that God has given you reason, and like everything else, Quran is the creation of God. It doesn't mean that somebody created God, but they said that since entire world is the creation of God, that's why Quran is also creation of God. And they talked about the attributes of God. They said that they are metaphorical, they are not physical. So like they would argue that if God has said in the Quran, God has hands, or he can see, or he can speak. So they would argue that by uh, seeing, we might interpret it God's wisdom. It doesn't mean that God has eyes like human beings. If God is talking about his hand, it might be a support to the oppressed, to the people who are in trouble. If God is talking about speaking, it may be, sort of advocacy for those who are in trouble, that we should speak for them. While people like Imam Hanbal, Timia, Abul Hasan Ashari, Ghazali, to some extent Fakhruddin al Razi, they would say no. Quran has said God has eyes, so he has eyes. It says that God has hands, so he has hands. So we don't have to argue this. So that was the basic argument. Then people like Hanbal, Timia, Abul Hasan Ashari were accused of being fatalist. They said that everything has been predetermined. So they believed in predestiny. Uh, while rationalists would say, no, God has given you reason, he has given you intellectual capacity to distinguish between right and wrong. And they would argue that if everything has been written by God, if everything has been predetermined, then why should God account for us? God has given us reason, He has given us His message. Now it is up to us to distinguish. And based on the decision that we make here, using our brain, using our intellectual capacity, using our reason, we would be accounted for accordingly. So God cannot punish anyone without making him autonomous, without making him independent. If one is not independent, that then he cannot be blamed for the actions that he has undertaken. While fatalists like Hanbal, Ghazali, Ashari, Timia, and later on all Mullah, Dr. Israr, Maududi, and others, they would say, no, you may be committing the action, but it is God who has already written it. So how could there be any question of accountability? Then rationalists believe that both reason and Sharia can lead mankind towards welfare. For instance, the Sharia might tell you that you should not oppress anyone, you should not commit any theft, you should not rob anyone, right? You should not commit excesses, which will lead you towards welfare. But on the other hand, if science has come up with the vaccine, let's say for tuberculosis, with the drops for eradicating polio, with the treatment for asthma or any other illness or disease, so that is also good for humanity. If science has come up with a machine that eases life, which creates comforts, so that is also for the welfare of mankind. So they would say that both reason and Sharia could lead you or could guide you in a positive way, while um the traditionalists, they only believe no, only Sharia can guide you. So these were the debates. Then there are some scholars who would argue, there may be some critics who might argue that the real problem lies in the very definition of scholars. They cite a certain verse of Quran that talks about sunset and sunrise, and it says that the real scholars are those who ponder over mysteries of nature in a way, or who ponder over the sunrise and sunset. So rationalists might argue the real scholars are those who ponder over mysteries of nature. Under the line of this verse, the rationalists could argue the real scholars were the Muslims, philosopher, thinkers, scientists, mathematician, geographer, physicist, biologist, who happened to be somewhere between 8th and 13th century, in some respect up to 16th century. If we talk about people like Taqiyuddin, who happened to come up with the idea of observatory to observe galaxy, the first observatory in the world, like a Danish scientist. But unfortunately, since we did not understand the definition of scholars, we happen to see bizarre precedents in Islamic history. For instance, Turkey was the first Islamic country to have printing press, but the mullah said that it's haram. So, according to some historians, nothing could be published in Arabic or Turkish. Armenian Jews and some Christian were allowed to publish, but at the time when most of the Europe was publishing books and they were enlightening themselves, they were trying to discover world. Mullah pushed us towards stone age by issuing fatwa, which was then imposed by two rulers of the Ottoman Empire. In the same way, when loudspeaker was invented and when it was introduced in India, it is believed that one of the top muftis said that devil barks through it. Today, all mullahs are using it. In the same way, there have been objection to ultrasound, photography, television, internet, mobile, colors, and movies, all that. You can see that, for instance, Ilyas Qadri famously said that TV is a work of devil, and today he himself is running Madani channel. In the same way, the father of Taqi Usmani and Rafi Usmani Mufti Shafi was accused of saying that loudspeaker is haram or devil barks through it, but all mullahs are using it. So we have these bizarre examples in our history because, according to critics, we did not understand the definition of scholars. And our scientists, our philosophers, the people with critical thinking, they were persecuted. Ibn Taymiyyah more or less declared Ibn Sina, whose canon of medicine was taught in Western university, and he more or less declared him non-Muslim. He also declared Shiite non-Muslim. In some ways, he also declared Barelvis non-Muslim, and anybody who was going to Shrine, in his view, he was also non-Muslim. The same way, he went to the extent of declaring Asharite, who were Orthodox Muslim. He also had reservation towards them, or in a way, he also pushed them out, you know, uh, from the circle of Islam, hurling in a way fatwa against Abu Fakhruddin al-Razi. In the same way, Ibn Rushd had to face a lot of persecution. His books, it is said, were burnt. He was the guy who is known as Averroes in the Western world, and his books were translated. And in Al Andalusia, you had educational institution where Muslim, Christian, Jews, and other people would work together. They would collaborate. And in the same way, in the House of Wisdom, you had Nestorian, Jacobites, Jews, Hindus, Zoroastrian, Muslim working together. So some critics believe that Seljuki rulers, they wanted to create parrots, they wanted to create obedient subjects. So that's why Nizamuddin Mulk Tusi, who was their top advisor, he came up with the idea of Dars-e Nizami. Imam Ghazali, some historians believe that he was the first principal. Some historians say no, he was one of the lecturers. And Dars-e Nizami then introduced this current system that is being taught all over the world. And Sahil Adeem is also one of the guys who believes in this system to some extent. He is also a sort of follower of Imam Hanbal, Shafi'i, and other traditional mullah. He may talk about mathematics, this and that, but he will never tell you that what did the Muslim world or people like Hanbal, Imam Ghazali, Abul Hasan Ashari, Ibn Taymiyyah, and other traditional mullah do with these mathematicians, with these biologists, with these physicists, with these philosophers, with these people with critical thinking. So they think that unless and until we understand the real definition of a scholar, we won't be able to, acquire modern knowledge. We won't be able to compete in modern world. But unfortunately, Sahil Adim is trying to impose an orthodox interpretation of Islam, and this is not new. Take his views about Afghan Taliban, talk about his views about women. I mean, in some ways, he's misogynist. He famously said that 95% of Pakistani women are illiterate. His attitude towards women, his stance on other issues, the type of freedoms, his venom against secularism. So his lectures are, in a way, a recipe for disaster, especially for the Muslims living in Western world. Why? Because he is rabidly anti-secular. And what is secularism? Like Maulana Maududi, he also distorts the definition of secularism. In simple words, secularism tells you that no matter what is your religion, color, caste, and creed, if you meet a certain criterion to make it to get a government position or administrative position. For instance, let's say if there is a certain examination to become a deputy commissioner in Australia, or to become a judge in Australia, or to become a magistrate in Australia, you pass that exam. So after that exam, you have met the merit criteria. The government is not going to ask, we can't give it to you because you happen to be Hindu or Muslim or Christian or Zoroastrian or Jew or Sikh. They say, all right, that has nothing to do with your religion. You met the criteria, and we can offer you. In the same way, if you want to be an Australian Prime Minister, if people have voted you into power, the government is not going to say, since you are Muslim, Hindu, Christian, Parsi, so or Zoroastrian, you cannot be given this position, right? Today, if you have World Islamic Missions offices in Canada, in America, it is because of the fact that these countries are secular to some extent, or in some ways to a great extent. If you have Majlis-e Khatm Nabuwat offices in the UK, again, it is because of secularism. If you have, mosque all over Western world and religious seminaries in Western world, it is again because of secularism. Because when Europe had religious government under Ferdinand and Isabella in 1492, they kicked out all Muslims. They also kicked out all Jews. First, they forced Jews to convert to Christianity. Some of them did, some of them did not, wholeheartedly. So they would privately practice, or they would practice in a hidden way. They came to be known as crypto Jews. And many Muslims had to leave. They had to go to, North Africa. So the question is that if Sahil Adeem is opposing secularism, if he is heaping scorn on liberalism, there could be criticism of liberalism, but there are some good aspects of liberalism. The worst thing that Western liberalism has offered is its economic system that is full of exploitation and greed and lethal weapons. But these Islamists, like Sahil Adim, they want to have nuclear technology, they want to have missiles, they want to have tanks manufactured by Western companies like Lockheed Martin, British Aeronautical Engineering, or maybe Rafael. But the harmless or innocuous, things of Western world, like birthday, like Santa Claus, like Christmas, like music, like movies, that do not cause any harm in reality, or they may not cause as a big harm as, let's say, nuclear weapons. They are opposed to it. So if he wants Islamic system in the Muslim countries, would he allow Christian world to have Christian system? Would he allow, or would he want Hindus to impose Hindutva in India, and relegating more than 200 million Muslim to the status of Shudras or lower caste people? By the way, some Pakistani mullah have said that they are not bothered about Indian Muslims. They don't care about Indian Muslims. If Hindus want to relegate them to the status of Shudra, that's okay, that's their business. But they want an Islamic system in Pakistan. So the question is that people like Sahil Adim have never gone through the history of Europe, the history of papacy, the history of religious war. For instance, only in 17th century, more than 3 million people were decimated in religious war that lasted for 30 years, from 1648 to uh, from almost 30 years. So let me calculate, it ended, yeah, 1618 to 1648, right? So it lasted for 30 years. Then you have instances where 10,000 or 5,000 Roman Catholic uh, were killed, maybe in Protestant countries. In one instance, more than 5,000 Protestants were killed in France. So Europe was fighting. I mean, in Germany, in Poland, in Sweden, in France, all over Europe, they were fighting. After indulging in so many battles and fight, after spilling a lot of blood, they finally decided that religion should be your private matter. So Sahil Adeem wants complete religious freedom for Muslim in countries like Australia, Western countries. But people like him do not want to give the same freedoms to the to the non-Muslims living in countries like Pakistan or Arab world. So this is a sheer hypocrisy. So the reason as to why I'm saying that this is a recipe for disaster, because Sahil Adeem on the one hand seems to be justifying or heaping eulogies on Afghan Taliban. On the other hand, he wants to talk about global caliphate, global domination, political Islam. And political Islam has badly damaged interest of Muslim all over the world. He is in a way trying to propagate an extremist ideology, because when you say global domination, he everywhere he's going and telling people that you are born to rule over the world. Muslims are born to rule over the world, which is very much non-Muslim interpretation, because there are scholars like Maulana Wahiduddin or Javed Ahmad Ghamdi Saab and others who believe that there is no concept of domination. All you have to do is to give your message and let people decide, and which sounds quite rational. Now, imagine if 200 million Muslims start seeking domination in India, what will happen to them? Hindutva is already on the rise. If Muslims try to assert their power, if they say that they are there to rule over India, what will happen then? In the same way, in Western world, in including Australia, where the far right has already been spitting venom against Muslims, if people like Sahil Adeem come to Australia telling them, oh, Australian Muslims are there to rule over Australia. They are there to impose Sharia, relegating Christians and Jews to the status of dhimmi or zimmi, taking jizya from them. What will happen then? So this is a recipe for disaster. Al Qaeda, ISIS, Islamic State, they also raised the slogan of political Islam, and what happened? In Pakistan, Jamaat Islami and Dr. Israr and other political religious parties, they also raised the slogan of political Islam, and what happened? Their own kids studied in America and Western world. They sent poor kids for jihad, and all those who were involved, now they are awash in wealth. They all have a lot of wealth, like Taqi Usmani, Rafi Usmani, who ardently supported today. They have luxurious cars. They are living in mansion, leading very luxurious life. In the same way, you could look at other mullah. None of their kids went to Afghanistan. It destroyed Afghanistan, and the ideology of political Islam destroyed Syria, decimating more than 500,000 people, forcing more than 11 million people to flee their homes, internally or externally displaced. It destroyed Iraq as well. And the conflict of Iraq cannot be solely blamed on the jihadists, but of course, the United States and West also played an important role. Afghanistan stands destroyed, Libya stands destroyed, all of this because of political Islam. So, the right course might be like as Maulana Wahiduddin of India used to say, that Muslims should be a no problem community. They should respect the law in the country where they are living. So if Western Muslim start following hegemonic attitude after listening to people like Sahil Adeem, it's going to be catastrophic. Therefore, they should take it with they should take the statement of Sahil Adeem with a pinch of salt. And do not forget that this guy Sahil Adeem, who heaps scorn on secularism, he himself, uh, you know, is accused of taking Canadian or American nationality, right? Of secular country. So if you are living in a secular country that have provided you shelter, that have provided you good opportunity to get jobs, so you should avail those opportunities instead of sending your kids to religious seminaries or madrasas in Pakistan where children are beaten up like animals, where they face sexual assaults by mullah. So this is the time that instead of running after traditional mullahs in branded dress like Sahil Adeem, Australian Muslim need to open their eyes. They need to study people like Ibn Sina, Averroes, Ibn Baja, Ibn Tufail, and other Muslim scientists, Al Khwarizmi, and other people. And one could argue, no, Sahil is not opposed to uh, science, and Muslim scholars are not opposed to science. Now, the question is, Darse Nizami has been there since the time of Nizam al Mulk Tusi. It means more than 700 or 800 years. How many scientists has Darse Nizami system produced? You can have a reservation towards Maudsallites, towards rationalists, but their tradition produced a lot of scientists. Why? Because they did not have religious hatred. They believed in knowledge and they thought that it can be acquired from any corner of the world. That's why in Baitul Hikmah, you had Jewish, philosophers, Muslim philosopher, Christian philosopher, Jacobite, Nestorians, Zoroastrians, Hindus. Muslim learned mathematics from Brahmagupta. He was Hindus. In the same way, in Al Andalusia, you have Muslim philosophers working with Christians, Jews, and even pagans, even agnostics and atheists. Tell me which Darsi Nizami or which madrasa of Darsi Nizami has demonstrated this collaboration, because they believed in hating other people. They believe in looking down upon other religions. They believe in denigrating the followers of other religion. That was not the case with Muslim philosopher. That was not the case with Muslim scientists. That was not the case with Muslim thinkers. Al Biruni went all the way to India, learning Sanskrit, learning algebra, and all that, mathematics, and other sciences. So they did not have this hatred because they wanted to acquire knowledge. But these people who are coming from Darsin Nizami, they have very narrow worldview, like Sahil Adeem. Now, Sahil Adeem wants to see global dominance through political Islam. This political Islam has already destroyed Muslim world with catastrophic consequences. So therefore, Australian Muslim should be very careful, and they need to understand that this guy, no matter what he says, look at his institute. He's charging $34 per student, and at the same time he's claiming to serve. That is, I'm only telling you about Arabic classes. Look at the fee schedule. In some cases he's charging $70, he's charging $50 per student. Now tell me, in a country like Pakistan, where more than 90 million people are living in poverty, more than 25 million kids are out of school. If he is really serving religion, why doesn't his institute enroll those students? Only students who have a lot of money or who can pay £40, £50 a month, which is a huge amount in Pakistan, right? They can enroll his institute. So this is very clear that in the same way, when he goes to deliver lecture at different places, I don't know if he was paid for Australian lecture, but in Pakistan, there are tickets. Like in Lahore, one ticket was for 750. So if 1,000 students attended it, it is more than 750,000 rupees, which is a big amount from Pakistani standard. Even from European standard, it is close to £2,000 or more than $2,000. So $2,000 within a span of 2 and 3 hours is really a big amount. So we need to understand that all these mullahs and this modern mullah Sahil Adim in branded dress, they're just trying to do business. They are not doing any service. They know that overseas Pakistanis have a lot of money, or at least they are better than their Pakistani compatriots. So uh, they are just trying to motivate those Muslims so that those Muslims could have a religious tendency, and then they join perhaps his institute or arrange his lecture and pay him something. So they should, Australian Muslims should themselves study the history of political Islam and how it was used and how it destroyed several parts of the Muslim world. By the way, here I also would like to mention a very interesting point that Sahil Adeem never bothers to talk about. All these champions of political Islam in the past, they were supported by the West. Ikhwanul Muslimin in Egypt, Ayatollah Kashani in Iran, Jamaat Islami in Pakistan, Hizb Islami in Afghanistan, even Hamas in Palestine. Why? Because the Western world was fighting against communism. So they used political Islam as a tool to fight against it. They were the ones who supported Afghan jihad. They were the ones who supported Ikhwan al Muslimin against Jamal Abdul Nasser because he had nationalized Suez Canal. And who owned Suez Canal or its share? French and the British. So Sahil Adim will not tell you this at all. In the same way, they were the ones who helped to topple the government of Sukarno in Indonesia, supporting Mas Chumi, which was a religious party. So we need to open our eyes and we need to take the statements of these people who are talking about political Islam or global dominance with a pinch of salt, and we need to pose tough question to them. And we need to, if we really want to do something, if Australian Muslims or Muslim in Western world really want to do something, instead of sending their kids to religious seminaries in India and Pakistan, they should rather send them to excellent educational institutions so that they could equip themselves with modern knowledge and compete in the modern world.